Welcome to Leaders in Light, Love, and Legacy. We're airing every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Zeno Radio /Fave Unite Radio. I'm Joy Ruffen, Leadership and Signature Style Specialist, your minister of enlightenment, awareness, and awakening. Woohoo! I love that. We're here every week diving into honest conversations about power, presence, and purpose. I'll be sitting down every week with a featured guest speaker who will bring you fresh insights on the divine masculine and the divine feminine and all that it entails, because remember, we all carry both, no matter our gender. It's all about alignment, leadership, and building a legacy that's true to who you are. So whether you're listening in for inspiration, direction, or just a new perspective, it's all meant to stir something in you. And remember, there's always more waiting for you right here at joyruffen.com. Now, my League of Eagles. Whoa, sit back, relax, and get comfortable, because this week, every week, I bring you a featured guest speaker who's going to ignite something in you. So get comfortable. My featured guest speaker today, we're going to cover a lot of territory, and it's all about this thing called life psychology. My featured guest speaker, Robert Ott, O-T-T, a nice, easy name to pronounce. You guys know how I have a hard time with pronunciations. And Robert is a positive psychology practitioner, professor, business consultant, and an accomplished author with over a decade of experience in leadership. We're so aligned. He'll tell you that he's passionate about cultivating dynamic, high-performing teams in remote and in-person learning environments. Now, I could go on and on and on telling you about Robert, but first off, I want you to say hello and help me greet my featured guest speaker. Robert, as they say on the telly, come on up and welcome.
Thank you, Joy, for inviting me onto the show.
It's a pleasure to have you here. And your business, your profession, your work intrigues and excites me. So how did you get into this wonderful world of psychology? How did you get there? Let's go to the beginning.
Okay, now that is a very loaded question. I think to answer that question, I have to go into my childhood, where I was labeled mentally retarded from a young age. And as such, I developed an inferiority complex, realizing that I was delayed emotionally, socially, and intellectually compared to my peers, and certainly my twin sister. And that inferiority complex carried forward with me throughout life, and even in my early 20s, I would say into my early 30s. As a result of that, learning has always been challenging. I am diagnosed with dyslexia, auditory processing deficit, and dysgraphia. As a result of that, that's where it manifests into an inferiority complex. So my entire life, I experienced these disabilities as a result of the way my neural activity would develop within the confines of my brain. It took me a long time to get past that. A lot of discipline, perseverance, and resiliency. That was the starting point.
I get it. I have received it. And I'm sure that there are millions of others out there who will receive it. And you know why? You shared a couple of things that I wasn't aware of. I think you might have mentioned it and it went by that you had a twin sister. But the reality is that I had the same type of somewhat aligned upbringing that you just mentioned. And so because of that and I didn't know it at the time, because back in my day, I mean, we're generations apart here, we didn't have the terminology for dyslexic and ADHD and auditory processing disorder. That only because my sister was a psychologist was I able to find out later when I was a young lady. So I get it. And this inferiority complex, it comes in so many different forms. And that took you into this work because you knew that there was a lot of brilliance within you, because I always felt that as well. Not above anyone, but I knew that I wasn't inferior, but I didn't know how to access and get to the core of me. So tell us about all of this study that you did and the time that you've had to get away from that, and now how you're supporting others.
When I was finally diagnosed with dyslexia, it came about because I was in third grade and there was a standardized math test that we needed to take. And I don't remember the name of it, but I think for some reason it was called the CAM test. That's what comes to mind. I took the test. I scored a perfect score, 100%. And I was flagged for cheating, academic dishonesty. And the strange part about that, I was the only one in the room that scored a perfect score.
Wow.
And the second highest score, I believe, was a 90%. And then everybody fell below that. And they couldn't understand because they believed that I cheated. And there was no academic dishonesty. My parents got called in. I got called in. I got interrogated like it was the Spanish Inquisition. Then the principal decided to run a battery of tests on me. And they did that. And it turned out I was dyslexic with a very high IQ. And they couldn't make sense of it. Now, anybody that's dyslexic or knows anybody that's dyslexic recognizes and understands clearly that their neurons do not operate the same as a normally functioning brain. Pathways are probably different. The density associated with certain aspects of various lobes, like the frontal lobe, for example, is probably different. It makes us quite unique, as you know, because you've got a learning disability yourself.
I do. I am dyslexic.
Yeah. And what you realize at some point is that you either learn to thrive or you go the opposite direction. I learned to go the opposite direction, not because my parents weren't trying to get me support and tutors and so forth. I went the opposite direction because I was in a school system, which is not very different than today's school system, where you have a lot of apathetic teachers. And these apathetic teachers are very dismissive. They'll call you stupid. And when I was in grade school, it was not politically incorrect to call somebody mentally retarded. And that's exactly what they did. So I always felt stupid, and it would amplify over a period of time. When I finally graduated from high school, which I wasn't even sure how I graduated from high school, I feel that the graduation rate was as much of a problem back then as it is today. So they just have a tendency to push people through the system. I then was told by my counselor, you should take up a trade. Don't go to school. You'll never make it. You'll never amount to anything. And they were allowed to say things like this back then. Today, you'd probably get fired because nobody wants to talk about things. They just say, oh, everybody's okay. So I decided... Yeah.
I'm sorry. Let me interject you right then and there, because all the things that you're sharing, I've experienced these myself, and we're generations apart. But yet, it just goes to show you how, as much as things have changed, they haven't changed that much. But what you said, Robert, that I want to pick up on later, not now, I want you to continue the story, because this is what I'm finding. And even because of my learning disabilities and things that I deal with, how they are, because of this politically correct that came out whenever it came out, and they push everybody through the system because they just want the numbers and they don't want the real true statistics about pushing them through it. They can't speak English. They can't add. It's sad, but that's what's happening. But you didn't allow that, and your parents didn't allow that to happen to you. So I'm sorry, but I want to get back to pushing through the system and why we've gone in that direction, and that you're deep in the educational system. Yes. Apologies. Continue, because this is thrilling. You learn to thrive.
Yeah, absolutely. I wasn't expecting to even talk about stuff like this. So I know one of the things that you admire about me is that you like how direct I am. I don't sugarcoat things. I'm just very direct, and I don't have I don't have any apologies about it because it's who I am. It's what shaped me. It's like steel being forged through a hot furnace. You know, you have to go through that process, as painful and uncomfortable as it is, before you are made into who you are meant to be, or at least who you think you're supposed to be. So going back to the story, when I finally got pushed through the system and graduated, I went to college. And for the first 2 years of school, I failed out every semester. The only classes I would pass is gym.
That's funny.
I would only pass gym.
Too.
Yeah, I couldn't pass anything else. And you know what the problem was, Joy? When I was in primary and secondary education, I was not disciplined. I was never taught how to develop the discipline to sit down, read, write, and persevere and study. So in the first 2 years of college, I failed out. And I think I was almost 21 years of age. I was working as a machinist. I was making, I think, like $12 an hour at the time, which at that point, that wasn't particularly bad money. It was certainly above minimum wage back then. And I remember my friends in their senior year of college, some of them graduating and getting decent jobs. And I thought to myself, I need to go back to school because I can't imagine doing this for the rest of my life. You know, this poor miserable existence. So I decided to go back to school, and I wasn't confident in my ability. So I went back to school part-time at a community college after failing out for 2 years. And when I did that, my thought process was this: I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it. I'm probably going to fail out the way I did in the first 2 years, and I'm probably not going to be any better than I was when I was in high school. But what I was committed to try is to really put a lot of effort into it. So I took 2 classes only for about a year and a half while I was working close to 50 hours a week. I decided not to go out on weekends. I did not hang out with many people. I decided not to date. I focused literally on work and my studies. And I was always reading and writing, reading and writing, reading and writing. My friends would say, "Come on, I haven't seen you in a while. Come out." Nope, can't do it. I got to stay in. I made it a point to discipline myself. Now, I did go out with them, just not as frequently as I would have liked to. And certainly not at the frequency that other people my age would go out with their friends.
Right.
I also realized, being dyslexic, if you really want to overcome it, you have to change everything in your environment. And it is not fun. It is not pleasant. It means rolling up your sleeves and doing the hard work. So every chapter I was assigned, I read. Rarely did I not read every page of the chapter. And if I didn't read every page of the chapter, I read a great majority of it. I didn't just read it once. I read each chapter twice because my brain needed additional time to focus on that material.
Let me ask you something. Let's go back a wee bit, because you're giving out a lot of tips and nuggets here that people who are in this ballpark that we're in somewhat will take this to heart and soul and value it. But what you said that I want to piggyback on, Robert, and it's really valuable before we go further, because you said something that took me a much longer time to grasp, this thing called discipline. For whatever reason, most of us who are under this umbrella, we don't and didn't acquire that. It took me a long time to even get there. And even now, sometimes I segue. How did you get that memo? How did you just know that you yourself had to teach yourself discipline? And not ever, no blame, no bashing, no blasting anyone, your parents or whatever. But why did that not come to you earlier? The why is there always a part, but no blame attached to it. So how would you speak to that? Because I think that's paramount for someone to get more of an inkling and understanding of.
You know, Joy, I don't have a clear answer for that because I never was told what discipline really consisted of. What I did have is a father who modeled discipline because he only had, a 7th grade education. My mom dropped out when she was in high school. So I'm a first generation student, just like you and your sister. And, upbringing was horrible. And I don't mean horrible in the sense that there was no love, horrible in the sense that I grew up in poverty, and that's a tough thing. And my parents eventually did well, but when you're growing up poor and you have a learning disability and you're living in an impoverished area that people don't respect, kind of similar to Fort Pierce, for example. But in New York, you realize, you've got the world against you. I didn't have good role models other than my father who showed me the discipline of hard work. Baker by trade, always working 10 to 15 hours a day, depending on the day, 7 days a week as baker. And there was something about that I learned early on, because I never saw my father much because of the sacrifice he needed to make for the family, which I never understood at the time, but I understood later on because he needed to provide. And without an education, he did the best he could. And he had to work long hours to make the money he needed so we can exist at the most marginal level. And that was important to me. And I think that's what brought me to understanding discipline.
You know what, Robert, you said in the beginning that, I don't know, Joy, I don't have an answer for that. But the answer that you gave is brilliant. And here's why. Because your father, even though you were in this impoverished environment and so upbringing, so was my sister and I, that he modeled for you the discipline of hard work, the consistency and the persistence in doing it. And somehow that was like, kids are like sponges, no matter, and parents are like the gods somewhat, good, bad, or indifferent. So he was your model. He gave you this incentive to teach yourself, to get yourself disciplined so that you could gain what you needed. I didn't have that, but I understand it now. I have understood it from my sister and I having all these good, juicy conversations, and also you're confirming what you just shared. So yes, you weren't taught it, but you were shown it by your father. Yeah, I like that.
And that was in the form of physical work. And when you're trying to understand discipline as it relates to academics, that was really difficult because, as you know, and I'm not sure what your journey consisted of having a disability, but for me, I realized that reading a chapter that was assigned to me for a particular coursework, I needed to read it twice in order to have a better understanding of it, where I realized that people that I know, they read it once or read half the work and they got it a lot faster. For me, I had to consider changing my approach to how I think information should be acquired. And what's funny about that, there's two things that are funny about that. My mornings start at 3:00 in the morning. And at 3:00 in the morning, for the first 3 hours, I spend reading books that I want to read, which behind me you can see a canon of books, all hardcover, that are beautiful books. Right now I just finished reading Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. I don't really read a lot of psychology at this point. I read a lot of books that I want to read that have to do with Western civilization and literature, philosophy. But the literature I read touches upon psychology, the Federalist Papers, all these great things. But my point is, I read 3 hours a day consistently. I have learned the art of discipline, where I believe that if it's important to you, you will find your why to endure anyhow. Sounds very Nietzsche and Frankl in theory. As a result of that, I carve out 3 hours starting at 3 a.m. until 6 a.m. in the morning before I do anything else, because the world is quiet and silent, and I can get the readings in that are important to me. Because when the day starts, time disappears.
I heard that. I received that but you do this reading 3 hours a day consistently. I mean, is this still a practice that you do?
Yes.
Because I find that I'm a pure night owl, and the words you mentioned that, you don't want to be conceived or thought of as stupid and dumb were words that because as a pretty little girl, I didn't want to be classified that way because I knew I wasn't. So that's why I would sit back and take it in. But I became a voracious reader, and the library became my second home. But I didn't do that consistent 3 hours a day, whatever time span that you're doing. I think that's beyond admirable. It really is. And that you're still doing this today. And being a voracious reader Crime and Punishment. I must have been 14, 15 years old when I read it. Can you believe that? Yes, I did. Half of the words I didn't even understand, but I was reading anyway. I love the library. I love the library. That is fantastic. That is How do you, if you're reading 3 hours a day and you're given from 3 in the morning until 6, what is your sleep pattern? How does that affect you? I mean, these are little things we want to know. Inquiring minds want to know.
I go to bed every single night between 8 and 9 o'clock at night. Oh. I sleep restfully. I get up at 3 a.m. I start my morning, and I repeat the same cycle every day. On Saturday and Sunday, however, I sleep in until 5. So I get an extra 2 hours a night. And I don't read 3 hours, but I'll read like 2, sometimes 3 on the weekends. But during the week, it's always consistent.
Wow. You have really taught yourself then discipline, because that is something that when you're dyslexic and you have some of these learning processing disorders, that's major. And I celebrate and applaud you for that, because I don't think that's easy. Let's get now, and thank you for all of this private, public sharing publicly is what I'm attempting to say, because I think a lot of people are still today turning and not quite sure something is not right, and they don't really know how to get to find out what it might be. So when we talk about culture and current political climate, you mentioned earlier in the conversation about people are being pushed through the system. I think you even alluded to once that you were. So what is that all about? You're in the educational school system. What is that all about?
You know, I have to be careful how I word this, because it'll be public.
I know.
So forgive me if I sound a little elusive, but I also work in an environment where, you know, it's a very untrusting environment, if that makes sense, or at least that's how I feel. But I do think whenever there's federal, well, let's put it this way. Let's just speak openly about this right now. Economics. If you want to understand a pattern of behavior, the first thing you need to do, whether you are a criminal attorney, whether you're a financial auditor for the IRS, or whether you're an auditor in general or controller for a company, is you have to understand the mechanisms surrounding economics, compensation plans, everything, federal funding. When you finally understand that, and if there is federal funding that's tied to a nugget like graduation rates, for example, then you have to look at it quantitatively to ask yourself the fundamental question: does this statistic make sense for what we are producing from this particular district? Then you have to ask yourself, are there any outliers that might explain this? How does it compare to the rest of the country? I'm not really a firm believer, Joy, that there's a bunch of Albert Einsteins running throughout our school system. I'm very well aware of the amount of cheating that goes on. Just yesterday, actually, a teacher had to fill out a document for the district office because on a standardized test, a kid's, and I'll speak very general, a kid's end of year exam by the state got flagged because they used AI, artificial intelligence, on a laptop, and the teacher didn't catch them. Now, to be fair to the teacher completed the document, and the teacher did tell me, I read the script, I took all their phones, but some of these kids have burner phones on them, literally. Why would you have a burner phone on you? There's only a few scenarios, Joy, where you might have a burner phone. Joy, could you give me one or two possibilities why that is based on your experience?
Oh my God, I have no clue. I mean, it's so rampant what's happening with AI and cell phones and technology, and for young kids, it's amazing.
Yeah, so they used AI. Their exam got flagged. This person had to fill out a report. I said, don't even worry about it. You can't look, if you read the script to them, if you confiscated the phone, you can't control what they do with AI. You can't be on everyone's shoulder watching them. It's unrealistic to expect that of anybody.
It is. It's scary. It's scary. And you know what's scary to me, somewhat aligned with the example that you just gave, Robert, is that as far as young girls, I'm all about female empowerment, but knowing that it's about divine masculine and divine feminine coming together as a unit that's together and equal. That hasn't come about because we as females, I'm not going in that direction, drop the ball. But what I'm discouraged and what I see and hear from some of the people that I'm with is that these young boys are taking pictures of young girls and turning it into porno, and it's going out everywhere on these social. That is scary.
Oh,
that
gee,
is so scary. This technology, as much as I love it, there's a lot about it that we as adults, we have to be more cognizant of. And listening to one of the shows the other night, I mean, the foul language, kids are impressionable. You mentioned how you were as a youngster. I remember one of the great things about my being a happy senior is I remember what it was to be young. And that's why I like being around young people. But we're all sponges in a certain way, and they absorb all of this stuff they're seeing. So for them to say, hello, Robert, how the F-U-C-K are you? It's common for them. It's gross. It's crass. What happened to us? Oh my God, I've gone off in a dialogue here.
But no, Joy, you're not going on. I appreciate your honesty. I really like what you're saying. And to go back to your point about how kids are using the F word as they greet you, and you'll be disgusted by what I'm about to say. But
oh my God.
Oftentimes what you hear is a lot of these young people, and I have to continue to interrupt them and say, guys, please use different language. When you don't use the right language, that tells me you don't have a library of words to draw from. So when they're talking to their friends, they use the N word as if it's as
exactly
as saying hello. And I'm like, that is not acceptable. I don't care what your race is. It doesn't give you the right to use it. If you use it, then everybody else starts using it. Stop it. And then when you listen to the music, those are the types of words that are used.
Exactly.
Exactly. And they think it's normal. It's part of mainstream culture. Joy, I'm with you now.
Robert, to me, and it's not because I never bought into this, not because I'm a happy senior, but I'm saying this is not excusable because it is absolutely disrupting the ability to communicate. And I said to somebody, and they said, oh no, I said, as hip hop and rap came in, and all of a sudden women became BITCHESs, the BUTTT, the BUM bond became the end all be all. And now, I mean, it's sad what's happening to us, but I'm taking the high road because I think that somebody somewhere, and I already feel that you're in the process when you say to these people, these guys or whoever it might be, no, we don't use language like that. But these kids don't know how to communicate. They don't know how to use the language. You mentioned something in the beginning. You said it's elusive and a little bit untrusting. And I think you were attempting to be not blaming, but to say something. What is it with our system that's become untrusting and elusive? What's happened that you can speak of without having your head chopped off?
I think when we think about leadership in general, and I've been doing a lot of thinking about this.
Yes.
And Joy, because you're on LinkedIn often,
yes,
what you probably observe, just as I do and other people that are going to listen to this podcast, is that when you're looking at the feeds on LinkedIn, there's a lot of stuff about leadership, but not a lot of it is positive. If you read most of what they post, it's really complaints written in clever ways.
Yes.
And what you realize is that everybody has the same opinion of leadership. They don't communicate well. They're self-interested in their own success. They aggrandize their own abilities at the expense of others. They exploit each other to the tilt. There's not much empathy. And God forbid you reach out to anybody that you know and you ask them for help. They don't want to help, but they like to brag that they're in leadership. Oh. And I see this as a systemic problem, not only in our school system, but in the very layers of colleges and universities. And also, I see it in organizations. When your supervisor does not actually respond to your emails, either they treat you like you're insignificant, making you feel like you're a pariah, or They just have no time for it because you're the least inconsequential thing. But if you do something stupid, then we'll have a conversation. But the thing is, when you don't even communicate with leadership, that should tell them maybe these are the people that we should be communicating with because they're speaking infrequently. And we need to know what's going on with them. But they have no interest. So when they manage from a balance sheet or they manage quantitative data without actually trying to understand the qualitative meaning behind it, which is the storyline, as you know, a lot is left for interpretation. But I can see these people beating their chest at the end of the day saying, I did a great job. Really? You did a great job? You forced numbers into a box? Is that what you did? You know? And I see that I've been around long enough to understand what goes on in mortgage banking, school systems. And what I see is a common thread that is consistent across industry. And that's the raw truth. And everybody knows it, but nobody wants to talk about it because they're fearful. And as I mentioned to you before, I want to be careful what I say so I don't find myself on a board.
I hear you. And I've received it loud and clear because what you're talking about, and you started off talking about leadership and about LinkedIn, and leadership really starts with the self. And until you really know who you are and you have your moral compass aligned, where integrity and honor and loyalty is at the top, you can't speak to leadership.
Well, you sound like Socrates.
Yes.
Know thyself.
Know that. Well, it's a like my friend said to me, Joy, the age of reason and common sense is gone. Well, I'm not going to accept that because I know for sure that those of us, a few of us who band together and continue with our integrity, honor, and morality at the top honor, then we can put in the seed to begin change. So I know what you're saying, and I also understand your hesitation because leadership means first knowing how to lead and balance your own emotions and know who you are and not put blame and everything towards somebody else and not have greed in the picture, which is what you're talking about when it comes to the financial, juggling those numbers and keeping that balance sheet. I mean, it's crazy. But Robert, I take the high road. I take the high road because I know that education is important, but how are we segueing it where it is totally beneficial for those who really want to stand in their integrity and own it? Where do we go? How do we get there?
Well, I mentioned economics before. Economics is always a good starting point. For example, did you know, Joy, that approximately 13 million Americans have more than one job?
Yes.
And when you think about that, you start to realize the idiom that Marcus Aurelius said a long time ago in Meditations. He said, poverty is the mother of crime. And if you think about the context of that during the time of Aurelius's reign as emperor of Rome, and you think how many centuries and millennia have passed since that time, they're still there today. So take this into consideration. Elon Musk has control of $386 billion. He's the wealthiest man. That represents 22.8% of America's wealth. 22.8%. In 2011, in the aftermath of the Great Recession, the top 20% of the wealthiest people in our country controlled 84% of the wealth. What that means is that, to say it another way, 80% of the people were fighting and scrambling, many of them with more than one job, fighting over 16% of what's left over. So going back to what Aurelius said about poverty being the mother of crime, any country governed effectively should be ashamed by those, or let's put it differently. I want to read a small excerpt from my book, A Practical Approach to Life Satisfaction. If I turn to page 122, I go right to Aurelius, where he says, poverty is the mother of crime. And then I go on to write, poverty is shameful for any country governed effectively, and any country governed poorly should be equally embarrassed by those who have most of the wealth. When you think about the significance of that and also put Musk into that narrative, I'm not saying that wealth is a bad thing. I'm not saying that making money is a bad thing. What I am saying is that greed and always feeling that you need more at the expense of others living comfortably. So, for example, I could be wrong with this, but if you look at JP Morgan Chase and you look at Jamie Dimon, the CEO, I think he commands something like $32 million a year in executive compensation. Is it necessary for any one person to have that much wealth from a company when they constantly have layoffs and the average income there might be $80,000, for example, a year? And believe me, I'm not a socialist, but what I'm trying to say is if you understand the economics, you start to get a clearer picture. What motivates people to do things at the expense of others or the expense of integrity?
Yeah, I think that when you get into economics and so on, I get it and I understand what you're saying, but somehow, some way, I'm not quite sure of how it happened. I get the disparaging difference between those who are at the very, very top with gobs of money and those who are at the bottom with 2 or 3 jobs or more just to survive. But somehow this money has seeped into the greed category, even for the layman, because they're feeling that money will solve all of their issues and all of their concerns. It helps. You cannot live without it, but it is not the end all be all. It will not curtail all of your issues. We have seen that, Robert, over and over and over, especially in the entertainment industry where people get gobs of money and they're miserable and they succumb to all the different vices that are not healthy for them. So I don't know what the solution is, but one of the things I know for sure, and maybe you can speak on this a little bit as we wrap up here, and we have some time left, the meaning of life, because the meaning of life is to be your best self. This is a terminology that's floating through the stratosphere, but be all that you're here to be. Keep your integrity and your honor and your loyalty to self and then to others first, and continue to rise and be about finding your purpose, developing your skill, and then sharing it with other people. That is my base bottom line belief. So speak to me a little bit about the meaning of life and how one gets to know about who they are and put to the back burner this greed, this hunger for money, thinking that that's going to solve all your problems, because it's not. It helps. You got to have it. You have to have it. You ought to have it, but it's not the end all be all.
No, it's not.
Where do we go?
I think the collective consciousness of our country and certainly the world at this point is moving in a direction where they all want to be influencers.
Exactly.
They want to be as wealthy as possible. They'll do whatever they can because they're so fixated on it. And somewhere along the line, they start to become more expedient. And what I mean by that is you start to look for shortcuts. And when you look for shortcuts, maybe you're copying and pasting a portion of a cell from an Excel spreadsheet for financial purposes in a different area to make your bottom line look more attractive. And maybe it's because you want more compensation at the end of the day. So we take on the meaning of life. I think most people, and at some point in time, even myself, we have this grandiose idea that the meaning of life has to be something that's really big and explosive, where people look at you and the spotlight is right there on you, right there in the limelight. But at the end of the day, Joy,
yes,
the most extraordinary people are the most ordinary. And that's important to understand because that's a biblical truth right there. And if we look at it from a micro level, we realize that we have to learn how to engage in our small communities in a more direct and more engaging manner that increases one's responsibility. And if you can increase the responsibility that you are willing to bear on your shoulders, it could have a transformative effect on you morally, which takes you into another stratosphere. Mm-hmm. And as a result of that, you are running in a direction not with the herd, but you're running in the opposite direction. And that's where the beauty lies. Because when you do that, now you realize I need to make money, but at some point, is it compromising my relationship with my husband or my wife? Is it affecting my relationship with my kids? Is it affecting my relationship with friends and family? That is a very subjective question.
Well, that's very much so. And that brought me to what a friend of mine shared with me the other day, Robert, is that what you said, running with the herd as opposed to running against and so on. We as human beings, we have this hunger, this thirst, this starving to belong. And it goes back to what I said earlier, and you spoke to it too. Know thyself, belong to you first, love you first, get to know who you are so that you can share that with other people. And then that belonging will be more inclusive to engaging with integrity and your morality intact. That's my honest belief. I don't have to be right. I love to be wrong because that's how I learn. But I don't know how we're going to rectify all of this, because I do like and love technology, but I think it's taken us off into, but this happens with all new things, doesn't it, Robert? I mean, any, and this is not new, technology has been with us for a while, but now the masses are embracing it, embodying it in many ways. But every new, when it broaches the stratosphere and is out for everybody, it comes with the good, the bad, and the, I don't like the word ugly, so. That's just life. So where do we go from here? What are we going to do? The time keeps winding up here. You and I could have a conversation after conversation after conversation. I love it, because the meaning of life is what ultimately for ourselves we have to come to. So how do we wrap this up? What do we do? Where do we begin, Robert, to get our own, I don't use foul language, I spell it, but I'll just say stuff together.
Let's end with something from Marcus Aurelius, since I mentioned him before.
You like Aurelius, don't you?
I do. You can probably see the bust of him right behind me.
Yes.
When I think of leadership, I stare at him every morning from my sitting chair when I'm reading. And I often stare at him, and my wife laughs at me because I say when she finally wakes up, I'll say something along the lines, Emperor Aurelius, what could you tell me about leadership today? And the reason I say that is because when you read Meditations, you realize that he was a different type of emperor. Mm-hmm. And to end on this note, he goes on to say, the soul becomes dyed with the color of your thoughts. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's important for us on an ending note, because what we think about will ultimately shape the integrity of our soul, or it'll embrace the depravity that destroys it. And we have to figure out a way to try to foster and cultivate that change within, and to be a beacon of an example or a paragon of example for others to look at, where they can silently say, that person lives with integrity, that person is a good example of what I want to be like. And when that person speaks, I really need to listen. And that doesn't mean I need to be on every social platform, because it's a bloody mess when you do that, because you're scattering your seeds everywhere. And that's not a healthy place for anybody to be. I don't share with many people that I get up at 3:00 in the morning. And I certainly didn't do it today because this is going to be on a podcast. It was a very organic way of me presenting it. But now you know. And the reason I'm saying that is sometimes the best things that people do are out of the public eye. And eventually the story narrates itself to the surface, and then people become aware. You take a genius, for example. They always want to popularize what they did, but nobody ever really takes into consideration how many hours of writing and thinking Hemingway put into his work, or how many thought experiments Einstein needed to do before he actually finally produced the theory of relativity with that famous equation. Nobody really takes into consideration why Marcus Aurelius was really a unique leader, but everybody wants to be considered a leader and puts themselves right there on top of that ionic column, just like he's on right now, and they're not even worthy to be so. Nobody really wants to think below the surface. What we need to do is we need to spend less time in the limelight, less time on social, and more time in engaging and meaningful conversations with people, because that's where the magic is, not from a distance.
Well, I don't think you could have ended on a better note. You have brought back and ignited something on me to go back and read a little bit more. That some of it I've forgotten about Marcus. I can call him by his first name now. And the way that you ended this was very engaging, and I think it will ignite something in a lot of people. Robert, it's time, it's gone here, but give us the title of your book, because I want people to be able to go. Can they purchase this on Amazon, or how?
They can purchase it on Amazon. I prefer it because Amazon produces 80% or more of book sales nationwide, also globally. Right. But you have my website, I believe. Could you attach?
I do. I will put your website on your poster that I'm going to send to you. And when we send this out, when it's broadcasting the date, I will also put the title of your book so they can get there. But they'll be able to get to the website and get this right.
Yes, and it's right there on my website too. It's called The Practical.
What is the title? We can't see it. It's audio. So what is the title?
A Practical Approach to Life Satisfaction.
Ooh, I like that. A practical approach. Well, we need to get back to practicality. Robert, thank you for being with us today. You must come again. I would love.
Set me up in July for a video.
I will. And then we'll go a little bit deeper into some of the stuff that you shared here. Thank you. Hold tight. I'm going to be with you in just a second. Friends, Robert ended with be a beacon of light. Remember that here it's all about leaders in light, love, and legacy. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Joy Ruffen. I am your Minister of Enlightenment, Awareness, and Awakenings. Let's keep the conversation and the connection going. Join Robert on his website, which we will put and post everywhere, and join me on my website, joyruffen.com, to learn more about the work we do and the offerings and the sharings and the messages that we're spreading together. You can also reach me directly at my email address, jruffen@gmail.com. Visit with me today and visit with Robert and get to his website and find out a little bit more. You can see, you can hear all of the brilliance that he shares and he brings to you with a humbleness and a heart that's full of compassion and love. You can go much deeper when you visit with him on his website. You'll find a space to connect, to explore, and tap into the many resources that he's offering to you, mainly enlightenment. And remember, whether it's style, leadership, divine femininity, equality, or power, we spoke a little bit to them all today. It's about living your truth. There's always something new waiting here for you. So until the next time, my League of Eagles, stay present, stay bold, and keep soaring. Remember, every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we're here to engage with you. Sending you much, much love from my heart to yours. All the best. Cheers. Remember, Zen Radio/Fave, Unite Radio FM. From my heart to yours, much love and all the best. Cheers.